Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the silk slippers of a Tang Dynasty emperor, except it's way too early, your back is already sore, and there's a suspicious draft in the room. You're wrapped in 6 layers of brocade, incense curls through the air, and the sound of wooden sandals echo faintly down the corridor. It's not even sunrise, but your empire doesn't wait. Neither do your attendants. Your bed, though grand and gilded, has the softness of a lacquered table. You stir beneath a silk quilt embroidered with clouds and dragons. There's a low chime, the kind you've learned means someone's about to ask you to move, but will pretend they didn't. A eunuch's voice hums like wind through rice paper, "Your Majesty, the stars are dimming." Which is poetic code for, get up. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is. Tang Dynasty mornings wait for no one, but I do read every message. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is sharp. Not icy, but that cruel, nose-pinching cold that lives inside stone walls. You swing your legs over the edge of your raised platform bed, your silk socks immediately defeated by the chill of polished brick flooring. You wince. There's no central heating in 8th century Chang'an, just charcoal braziers, and someone probably forgot to light them. You stand up straight, spine creaking like an old gate, and breathe in the musk of centuries, cypress wood, ancient varnish, incense, and a faint whiff of last night's mulberry wine. Your personal attendant approaches, head bowed so low it looks like he's hunting coins on the floor. He's holding your dressing gown, though the term doesn't quite do justice to the shimmering, floor-length robe of crimson and jade brocade, with golden thread dragons twisting along the hem like they're about to fly off. As he slips it over your shoulders, you hear the rustle of many feet in unison. The eunuchs are coming. Like clockwork, a half-dozen men in matching blue tunics shuffle into your private chamber, forming a semicircle around you with practiced grace. They carry items that seem ripped from a minimalist horror film, a bamboo tongue scraper, a long-handled ivory comb, a jug of heated rosewater, and something that suspiciously resembles a sharp stick with silk floss. Tooth care in the Tang Dynasty is no joke. A eunuch approaches with the dental implement and bows with robotic solemnity. You open your mouth like a man surrendering at sword point. The stick, carved from fragrant wood, bristling with what might be horsehair, is inserted, and you begin the morning ritual of scrubbing the dragon's fangs. It feels like a squirrel is trying to polish your molars. Historians still argue whether Tang emperors genuinely endured this particular version of oral hygiene, or whether it was left to private moments. But one quirky artifact found in a nobleman's tomb suggests these stabby toothbrushes were the real deal, along with powdered clove and ash as early toothpaste. Glamorous, right? As the brushing ends and your gums gently throb, another eunuch steps in with warm water. You rinse, resisting the urge to spit on the floor, because nothing says divine ruler like hawking loogies. Next, face washing. You sit on a low carved stool, and a bowl of fragrant water is raised to your chin. 2 eunuchs dab your face with silk squares, like painters blotting a masterpiece gone slightly sweaty. It's not just hygiene, it's ceremony. Every movement is silent, symmetrical, and a little too rehearsed. This isn't about comfort. It's about making sure the Son of Heaven looks like he descended from the stars, flawless, perfumed, and definitely not half asleep. Now comes the hair. Tang fashion demands a top knot so high and stiff it could pass as an antenna. Your personal barber arrives, carrying an arsenal of combs, pins, and pomades. Your hair, long, dark, and slightly wild from sleep, is combed straight, oiled, and twisted upward with the kind of effort usually reserved for bridge suspension cables. The final touch is the imperial cap, black lacquer, squared edges, and a gold emblem front and center. At this point, you've been up for 40 minutes, have said exactly 0 words, and have been fussed over by more hands than a celebrity at a red carpet. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a bronze mirror polished to dull gold, your face pale in the cold light, your expression slightly dazed but dignified. The emperor stares back. You blink. He blinks. And just like that, it's time to walk. Not just anywhere. No. You must stride, not too fast, not too slow, down a corridor lined with ceremonial lanterns, each flickering against shadowy red walls. The scent of sandalwood intensifies. 2 attendants flank you, their arms out like airplane marshals to keep your robe from dragging on the floor. You pass by carved panels depicting cranes and lotus blossoms. Every image is a message, a prayer, a warning. Somewhere, a court historian is already noting what time you rose and whether you looked radiant with virtue or just grumpy again. That part's real. Scribes documented emperor wake-up times like sports stats. As you approach the Hall of Supreme Awakening, yes, it's actually called that, drums sound in the distance. They're not dramatic, they're measured. Like heartbeats carved in wood. With each step, you feel the weight settle, of robes, of crown, of responsibility. Somewhere in the courtyard ahead, ministers are assembling. You haven't even had breakfast. A final eunuch bows and murmurs, His Majesty approaches the light of governance. You fight the urge to respond with, yeah, well, His Majesty hasn't had tea yet. Instead, you roll your shoulders, lift your chin, and step into the dawn. You cross the threshold into the outer court just as the first light breaks through the mist, turning the white marble paving stones a cold silver. A few birds chirp optimistically from the rafters, but otherwise, the world holds its breath. You, the emperor, glide forward like a well-oiled statue. Your silk slippers are designed to be quiet, but still, they whisper against the stone, just enough to remind everyone, he's here. Already, the outer chamber is humming, not with noise, but with presence. Rows of court attendants, all dressed in strict shades of blue and gray, line the walls with heads bowed. They don't look at you directly. Looking at you is a bit like staring into the sun, only with higher risks of demotion. Then come the eunuchs. Dozens more, some so old you wonder if they remember the previous emperor firsthand, some so young they look like they're still wondering whether this was all a good idea. They swarm silently, organizing your morning ablutions part 2, the ceremonial preparation. A small, red-lacquered stool appears beneath you, seemingly from nowhere. You sit, hands on your knees, while 2 eunuchs carefully adjust your outer robes, smoothing creases, aligning the embroidered phoenixes on your shoulders, and straightening the insignia belt with reverence so intense it could be mistaken for fear. The brushes come out again, not for grooming, but for dusting. Your robe, though freshly worn, must be symbolically cleansed of the night's residue. They flick tiny flecks of nothing off your sleeves, your collar, your back. It's part ritual, part pageantry, and maybe, just maybe, part performance art. Historians still argue whether these daily robe dustings were sincerely symbolic or just palace superstition taken too far, but records from the Tang suggest emperors sat through this featherlight cleaning with the patience of a monk and the expression of a mildly disapproving statue. Once you are deemed sufficiently dust-free, the court astrologer approaches, yes, before you've eaten, and hands you a scroll indicating that today's omens are auspicious for deliberation, moderate for proclamations, but inauspicious for punitive decrees. You nod solemnly and try not to roll your eyes. Because what if you wanted to exile someone today? A eunuch leans in with a basin of scented water for your hands. You dip them in and out, the water warm and faintly citrus-scented, likely boiled with orange peel and medicinal herbs. Cleanliness before contact, even symbolic contact. Then you're led, again silently, to the hall of audience. It's not an easy walk. The hall is massive, built to impress and humble. Tall wooden columns painted crimson stretch up into shadows, and somewhere in the rafters, bats sleep in royal peace. The floor is polished stone so smooth you once watched a courtier nearly skate into a bronze urn. You suppress a smile at the memory. He survived. Barely. You ascend the dais with measured steps. This is your throne, not the lounging kind, but the rigid, upright, highly ceremonial platform of carved sandalwood and inlaid jade. You sit. You adjust your sleeves. And you wait. The first officials are announced with a booming voice that echoes too much for this hour. One by one, ministers in layered robes step forward, kneel, bow, and raise their memorials. These are formal written documents, each one hand-copied, full of florid phrases and way too many mentions of heavenly mandate. Today's first offering. A report on grain prices. Drought in the northern provinces, they say. Wheat yields are down. One minister suggests reducing the grain tax in 3 counties. Another disagrees, claims it'll encourage tax laziness, which, frankly, sounds made up. You raise an eyebrow, and both men flinch slightly. Good. Keeps them sharp. There's droning. So much droning. You develop a newfound respect for monks who meditate for days. Maybe they've just attended too many court sessions. A third minister steps up and presents a bear. Well, not directly. But he holds up a scroll describing a foreign tribute in the form of a trained dancing bear, recently delivered from the western regions. He requests imperial permission to house it within the court for public marvel and possibly imperial amusement. You nod slowly, as if considering the political ramifications of bear-based diplomacy. The truth? You're mostly wondering what it eats. This is the kind of thing that makes history fun. Between grain shortages and tax debates, someone always tries to smuggle a circus act into the empire. One fringe record even describes a Tang emperor being gifted a white elephant and assigning it its own rank in the military. Meanwhile, court scribes are taking notes. Not just of what's said, but how you react. Did the emperor frown at the grain report? Did he smile at the dancing bear? Did he shift uncomfortably when someone mentioned the northern borders? You clear your throat, softly, but intentionally, and the next round begins. Legal affairs. A governor writes in to request leniency for a village that accidentally harvested imperial medicinal herbs without permission. The phrase accidentally does a lot of heavy lifting here. You promise to consider it, which is palace code for maybe, if I remember. After roughly 30 scrolls, 3 formal bows, and one minister who sneezed mid-prostration and now probably fears for his life, the court session begins winding down. A eunuch appears by your side and whispers, "The Empress is prepared for the morning greeting." Ah, family time. You rise from the throne. Everyone bows as you leave, and you walk back through the hall with all the grace of a man who's still internally screaming from having been awake since before sunrise. As you step outside, the sunlight has finally broken fully over the palace walls. You squint. Not just from brightness, but from the looming promise of social duties ahead. Concubines, courtiers, and embroidered goat slippers await. Still, you exhale. You've survived the morning court. Barely. And somewhere in the distance, maybe just out of sight, a bear might be dancing. You don't walk to see the Empress, you are guided. There's a distinction. To walk would be casual. Imperial. But to be guided, by silent eunuchs, past silk-draped screens and flower-carved corridors, is to acknowledge the art of being seen. You're not a man strolling to breakfast. You're a symbol in motion. The hall of harmonious favor lies within the inner court, where your public mask shifts slightly. Out here, you're the sovereign. In there, you're the husband, the father, the divine presence among family, which is a role with far fewer perks and significantly more emotional landmines. The Empress, naturally, is already waiting. She rises from her lacquered chair with the elegance of someone trained to rise exactly 3 inches per second. Her robes are a dazzling array of reds and golds, her hair towered with jade combs, pins, and possibly half the contents of a small jewelry shop. She bows, but only just. Her rank permits a subtler deference. You nod in return, a fraction too deeply. She notices. Of course she notices. Historians still argue whether the empress of this era wielded more actual power than the emperor in private affairs. Some suggest that behind closed screens, her decisions influenced court appointments and family exiles. Others maintain that she, too, was part of the ceremonial machinery. The truth? Probably somewhere in between, with a sharp smile and an even sharper memory. You exchange pleasantries about the weather, which is always sunny in these conversations regardless of actual conditions. Then come the concubines. It's less a greeting, more a procession. They arrive in a line, like highly decorative dominoes, each one bowing in sequence. Some giggle too loudly. Some glance up too long. Others seem to radiate sheer boredom. There are dozens. You gave up keeping count long ago, especially after the 16 luminous pearls of the peach garden were added to your official harem roster. You're still not sure if that was a gift or a threat. One of them, Lady Zhou, steps forward to offer morning greetings. She's always too early, too eager, and suspiciously aware of court gossip. Her sleeves flutter as she bows with theatrical grace, and you catch a flash of embroidered goats on her slippers. You stare. They're not your slippers. But they are your embroidery. The pair you misplaced last week. She looks up. Does your Majesty admire them? You blink, slowly. Yes, you say. They look familiar. She smiles. Somewhere behind you, a eunuch lets out a wheeze that he tries to disguise as a cough. To your left, the Empress sips her tea with the calm of a woman mentally cataloging every detail for later retribution. Breakfast is served on nested lacquer trays, arranged with artistic precision. 10 dishes, no two the same. You lift the lid of the first, honeyed lotus root. The second, quail eggs, marinated in something spicy enough to wake the dead. The third, rice porridge with tiny green plums floating like bored sailors. You try a bite from each while maintaining a calm, regal expression, even as your tongue screams at the vinegar-soaked radish. Conversation continues. Lady Jean compliments your calligraphy from last week. Lady Sue quotes your poem back to you with minor edits. You pretend not to notice. One concubine asks about the dancing bear rumor, and you vaguely confirm while wondering who among them already bribed the handler. Meanwhile, the Empress subtly shifts the seating order. 2 of the women are now further away from you than they were last week. This is the domestic version of a political purge. You sip your tea and say nothing. You're emperor, not referee. A child runs in, your youngest son, dressed in a miniature version of your court robes and hat, which wobbles hilariously as he moves. He trips slightly, recovers, and throws himself at your knees. You lift him up and laugh, which is rare enough to send a ripple through the entire room. Concubines giggle. The Empress raises one eyebrow. A eunuch scribbles something on a tiny scroll. Somewhere, probably, a court historian notes, the dragon face smiled upon the 7th prince this morning. The boy points at your crown and asks, why is it so tall? You glance toward the Empress. She raises her teacup in reply, your problem, clearly. It helps me hear the heavens, you answer. Can I have one? You consider. When you're older. And have your own ministers to ignore. He laughs. You laugh. The court watches it all like it's theater, because it is. Eventually, the morning greeting wraps up. The concubines bow in reverse order, the way they came in. Lady Zhou lingers a fraction too long, probably to flaunt those goat slippers. You sigh internally. You'll probably never see those again. The Empress stands and walks you to the corridor herself, a gesture she only performs when she has something to say. Sure enough, as you step behind a carved screen where no ears are supposed to exist, she speaks. There's tension in the Eastern Pavilion. The eunuchs are choosing sides again. You nod. Which side are they choosing? She smiles faintly. The one with more wine, usually. Then she's gone, swept away like smoke through silk. You return to the outer chamber, your expression neutral. Eunuchs await with scrolls, ministers shuffle nervously in a nearby courtyard, and somewhere, someone is trying to decide if today is the right day to declare an irrigation emergency. But first, you need tea. And poets. Because next up is a meeting with the court scholars, which means an hour of poetic allusions, exaggerated bows, and carefully disguised eye rolls. If anyone mentions plum blossoms, you're walking out. The scholars await in the pavilion of refined insight, which is exactly the kind of name that makes you suspicious from the start. The room smells like ink, tea leaves, and unresolved tension. You step in, and 3 court literati rise with the kind of slow, performative grace usually reserved for actors or cats. They bow deeply, sleeves cascading like waterfall scrolls. One greets you in verse. Dawn breaks on dragon throne. Wisdom flows like mountain stream. May the jade cup not spill. You pause. Is that a metaphor? A warning? Or just breakfast poetry? You give a polite nod, the imperial version of aha. The jade cup in question, your actual teacup, is already steaming on a carved wooden stand. The tea smells sharp and earthy, probably pure aged longer than most of your cousins have been alive. You sit. The conversation begins the way it always does, vaguely flattering, mostly confusing, and entirely too delicate. Scholar Lu mentions the state of metaphor in civil governance. Scholar Shen counters with a parable about a peach tree growing sideways to escape shadow. Scholar He clears his throat and announces he has composed a humble verse for your Majesty's divine ears. You brace yourself. In the stillness of ink and moonlight, the Emperor writes with thunder's brush. Each stroke a command. Each dot a storm. You sip your tea. You nod slowly. You resist the urge to say, that sounds like an actual weather problem. One quirky historical note here, Tang emperors were expected not only to enjoy poetry, but to create it. In fact, some emperors wrote so prolifically that their collected works spanned volumes. Others had poems attributed to them by overzealous court officials who didn't want to admit the Son of Heaven couldn't write a haiku to save his life. You've written a few. Mostly during long meetings. But today, you're not here to compose. You're here to listen, and to let the scholars feel briefly important before they return to their ink-stained offices and gently feud over metaphor placement. The conversation pivots to Confucian commentary. Scholar Lu suggests that the southern governors are interpreting the Book of Rites too liberally, allowing festivals that blur the line between folk tradition and imperial propriety. You raise one eyebrow. Scholar Shen defends the festivals. Local joy leads to local loyalty, he argues, gesturing too close to the tea tray. You slowly move your cup out of splash range. The truth is, these meetings serve less as decision-making and more as intellectual fencing. The scholars spar, you spectate, and if something useful emerges, that's considered a bonus. What you do enjoy is watching the power dynamics play out, who defers, who interrupts, who bows lower than necessary. It's like reality television, but with better poetry and significantly more hair oil. The tea changes, now chrysanthemum, subtly floral. A eunuch quietly replaces the pot without a word. You sip and ask, what's the state of temple education in the border provinces? The room stills. Scholar, he coughs delicately. There have been murmurs. Some temples are teaching Taoist theory with military metaphors. You raise an eyebrow. Martial Taoism? He bows. Merely interpretive. But perhaps worthy of imperial review. Historians still debate whether this trend, monastic orders dabbling in martial arts and philosophy, foreshadowed later sects like the Shaolin. But your concern isn't whether monks are doing kung fu. It's whether anyone out there is building a spiritual militia under the guise of metaphor. You make a mental note. Then you glance at the incense clock. Time's up. The scholars bow, flatter you again. Your silence is more profound than 10,000 commentaries, and exit with synchronized sleeve swishing. You're left alone for a moment, the steam of the last cup swirling like mist over a battlefield. You breathe it in. For a few seconds, there's peace, no reports, no dramas, just tea and the faint trace of camellia blossoms drifting in through the paper lattice. Then a eunuch enters with a small scroll case. Private. Sealed. This isn't poetry. This is statecraft. You open it. Inside, 3 folded memorials. All marked with the red ink reserved for confidential correspondence. One is from the provincial magistrate in Dunhuang, warning of merchant guilds becoming increasingly uncooperative with tax collectors. The second is from your northern border commander, rumors of mounted scouts crossing too close for comfort. And the third. You pause. It's unsigned. Unusual. It details an incident in the inner court, an intercepted letter from one of your cousins to a mid-ranking official. The contents hint at alliance building. Possibly a challenge to your authority. The scroll is cautious in its wording, but the implication is there. You set the scroll down slowly. This is the part they don't teach in poetry. Being emperor isn't all teacups and parables. It's reading between lines written in disappearing ink, listening to voices that never speak above a whisper. You can't accuse without proof. You can't act without justification. So you sit in stillness, brow furrowed, as the empire's surface calm ripples with invisible undercurrents. Eventually, you rise. You return to the window. The camellias are in bloom. A breeze lifts their scent into the room, fragrant and soft. You think of Scholar He's poem, how each stroke of the brush could be a storm. You smile slightly. Then you call for your calligraphy kit. Time to write something thunderous. The eunuchs bring your calligraphy tools on a low jade inlaid table, arranged with ceremonial precision, for brushes with white goat hair tips, an inkstone smoothed by decades of use, a stick of black ink that smells faintly of pine, and sheets of pale yellow rice paper so thin they could be mistaken for dried petals. You don't rush. First comes the ink, ground with circular strokes against the wet inkstone, the black spreading like a spill in slow motion. You breathe in the scent. It smells of the past. It smells of every emperor who sat where you now sit, pretending not to be annoyed that ink grinding takes this long. A eunuch lays out the paper, then backs away, hands folded. No one speaks when you write. It's part reverence, part fear, and a little bit superstition. They say when an emperor lifts a brush, history holds its breath. You dip the bristles and hover over the paper. One deep breath. The brush touches down. Your calligraphy style is what scholars describe as xingshu, semi-cursive. Not too stiff, not too wild. It suggests a balance between control and insight. At least, that's what the sycophants say. In truth, your writing tends to vary depending on whether you've had lunch or not. Today's topic, a poem. Or at least, the appearance of one. It's a tradition, imperial brushwork presented to the court as a symbol of scholarly virtue. But the real audience is smaller. One official. A cousin. Maybe even your empress. And between the lines of beauty and metaphor, you'll plant messages. The peach tree bends toward whispers of spring. But the frost still lingers. On the garden wall. You sit back, eyes half-lidded. It's not your best work, but it says enough. Spring equals hope. Peach equals the court. Frost equals betrayal. Garden wall equals boundaries not to be crossed. Not bad for something written with one eye on possible treason. A eunuch retrieves the sheet reverently. It'll be dried, mounted, and accidentally displayed in the Eastern Hall. You imagine your cousin reading it, nodding thoughtfully, pretending not to get the hint. That's politics, Tang style, poetry with teeth. Then, just as the scroll leaves your hands, you do what any bored ruler does. You start doodling. In the margins of another paper, you sketch a warhorse in motion. The legs are too long, the mane exaggerated, but it feels good to let your hand move without metaphor. You add a rider, oversized sword, fierce eyebrows, definitely based on your favorite general. You draw a cloud under his hooves, because why not? You used to do this as a child, scribble battle scenes when your tutors thought you were memorizing the analects. Your father caught you once, flipped the paper over, and told you, if you want to draw horses, win a war first. Then he walked off, deeply pleased with himself. Historians rarely mention the personal sketches of emperors. It doesn't suit the divine mystique. But archaeological digs have turned up enough whimsical margin art, chickens, horses, and one particularly sassy-looking goose, to suggest that you were not the first monarch to get bored in meetings. As you finish your horse, an attendant appears at the doorway. Your Majesty, the noon meal is prepared. Perfect timing. You're led through a long, shaded corridor toward the private dining hall, a quieter space than the banquet chambers, where no ministers are allowed and the food is hot when it arrives. The walls here are painted with delicate images of court life, flute players, dancers, birds and trees. You pass a mural of a carp leaping up a waterfall and resist the urge to wink at it. You've made that leap. You just didn't realize how often you'd have to keep swimming. The dining hall is small by palace standards, only 12 seats, one table, and no musicians to drown out chewing sounds. The Empress dines elsewhere, today it's just you, a eunuch to serve, and 10 dishes that smell like contradictions. You sit. The first plate arrives, cold noodles in sesame sauce, garnished with slivers of cucumber. Refreshing. The second, pigeon breast with fermented plum glaze. The third, pickled bamboo shoots in chili oil. The fourth, some sort of gelatinous sea creature that looks like it lost a bet. You nod politely and avoid the sea thing. Then the Confucian arrives. He isn't announced. He doesn't bow. He just appears, settles onto the cushion across from you, and starts talking while lifting a dumpling with long, graceful fingers. It is said, he begins, that the harmony of the empire is reflected in the balance of the 5 flavors. You nod slowly, chewing rice. Spicy without sweet leads to rebellion. Sour without bitter weakens resolve. Salt without moderation, chaos. You raise one eyebrow. So I'm governing through soup now? He smiles, unfazed. Every meal is a metaphor. He means well. He's one of the palace sages, more philosopher than politician. You keep him around partly for balance, partly because his presence unsettles people who take themselves too seriously. As you eat, he muses about statecraft as a recipe. The people are like water, he says, and the ruler the vessel. Both must adjust. Or spill. You nod again. The dumplings are excellent. Historians still argue whether Tang emperors took real advice from these philosophical interludes, or simply tolerated them as moral window dressing. Either way, some of the empire's strangest policies, like the duck tax exemptions or the mandate to plant mulberry trees, likely began as lunchtime metaphors. By the sixth dish, steamed fish with ginger, you feel full. By the eighth, glutinous rice cakes filled with sweet bean, you regret not wearing your looser belt. By the 10th, you're no longer eating. Just listening. The philosopher sips tea. Tell me, Your Majesty, when was the last time you walked beyond the inner gates? You pause. Before winter. He tilts his head. And how did the wind feel? You think. Sharp. Smelled like cypress and chimney smoke. He smiles, sips again. Then the empire is still breathing. You nod. And just like that, he stands and leaves, his robes trailing behind him like mist. The eunuch clears the table silently. The dishes disappear, as does the gravity of lunch. You rise slowly, stretching your back, already bracing for the next ritual. It's nap time. Officially, the emperor's rest. Unofficially, the one part of the day where no one expects you to be clever, poetic, or politically alert. And honestly, you're ready for it. Nap time isn't optional, it's protocol. And it's not a nap in the doze on a couch with one slipper off sense. This is a full production, with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for royal births or extremely elaborate funerals. You're led to the Chamber of Golden Serenity, a name that oversells the actual experience. It's a rectangular room with walls lacquered in dark red, trimmed with gilded lotuses, and an eerily symmetrical arrangement of silent attendants who look like they're trying to meditate you to sleep with their eyebrows. The room smells of camphor wood and something herbal you can't quite place, possibly tiger balm, possibly crushed optimism. A low bronze brazier puffs out soft spirals of smoke. In one corner, a musician plucks a guqin so slowly it might actually be playing in reverse. At the center of the room sits the sleeping platform, your imperial nap box. It's raised slightly, its walls lacquered black with golden phoenixes on each side, and a canopy of sheer silk that lets light filter through just enough to cast ghost shadows on the bedding. A quilt of layered silks rests atop a mattress stuffed with goose feathers, rumored to be sourced from the palace's own pampered birds. You step into the box with deliberate care, lie flat, and pull the covers over your chest. It's stiff. It's ceremonial. It's sleep as theater. One eunuch pulls the silk curtain closed. The rest file out like shadows. The music fades to a single echoing note. And then, silence. Sort of. Because you're not actually asleep. Not yet. Your eyes close, but your mind doesn't. It drifts. And somehow, lying perfectly still under layers of embroidered opulence, your thoughts wander to some very non-imperial places. Like that gazebo. The cursed-looking one. You saw it yesterday during the afternoon inspection, cracked beams, slanted roof tiles, and a strange stain that looked suspiciously like someone once offered a goat sacrifice and forgot to clean up. That's tomorrow's problem. For now, you're supposed to rest. But resting as an emperor is an oxymoron. The moment you relax your muscles, your brain starts listing. Grain reports. Your cousin's secret letter. That minister who keeps blinking too much, what's his deal? And then, of course, the bear. Has anyone fed it? Did anyone teach it not to maul eunuchs? You shift under the blanket, which is as heavy as the tax code. The mattress sighs softly, a feather escapes and floats upward like your patience. You breathe. In. Out. This is what they don't show in murals. The downtime. The stillness between thrones and declarations. Where an emperor becomes just a man in a fancy box, trying to turn off the part of his brain labeled empire, micromanage everything. Some scholars say midday rests were medically prescribed, to balance the body's yin and yang. Others argue it was simply a result of large lunches and restrictive clothing. But one delightful fringe theory claims the rest wasn't about the emperor at all, it was a break for everyone else. After all, if the emperor's asleep, he can't issue new edicts, fire anyone, or launch a surprise inspection. After what feels like either 5 minutes or 3 hours, palace naps have no sense of time, you begin to slip into real sleep. The kind with soft, blurry thoughts and nonsensical images. Something about a scholar made of fish. A bear in a scholar's robe. Your slippers on the moon. And then. Your Majesty. The voice is gentle. Too gentle. Your Majesty, the afternoon schedule awaits. Of course it does. You stir, eyelids reluctantly lifting. The curtains part, light slices through, and the empire returns to you like a weight dropped onto your chest. A fresh robe is offered, lighter, more practical, but still imperial. You sit up, swing your legs over the edge, and accept a steaming towel to wipe your face. The scent is ginger and orange peel. Refreshing. Almost defiant. As you stand, your joints pop like firecrackers. You'll never survive this, you mutter under your breath, just loud enough that the closest eunuch pretends not to hear. Outside the chamber of golden serenity, the afternoon waits in full costume. The sky has cleared, the breeze has picked up, and someone has positioned a folding screen at a perfect angle to cast a decorative shadow across your path. It's a phoenix chasing clouds. Subtle. You're about to be paraded. Afternoon inspection sounds useful, but in truth, it's part theater, part exercise, and part subtle punishment for having eaten 8 dumplings. A curtain palanquin is offered. You decline. Better to walk. Show the court your spine still works. Your path winds through the inner gardens first, carefully arranged ponds, pavilions, and groves where everything appears natural but is actually deeply micromanaged. You stop by a cherry tree in bloom. The petals fall at just the right speed. Coincidence? Doubtful. A gardener bows so low his forehead nearly uproots a flower. He mutters something about the carp pond. You nod solemnly. You have no idea what he said. It sounded urgent. Then you pass the punishment pavilion. That's what it's unofficially called. Officially, it's the Hall of Discipline and Administrative Correction. A poetic name for a stone courtyard where low-level officials dig ditches, organize ledgers by hand, or tend to mosquito-heavy tea fields. One man, barefoot, red-faced, is sweeping the same patch of tiles with exaggerated vigor. He sees you. You nod. He bows. You both pretend everything is fine. Then comes the gazebo. It lurks in the northeast quadrant like a villain in a cheap play. Its beams are skewed, its roof slightly concave, and the paint is peeling in a pattern that vaguely resembles a screaming face. You pause. You squint. A eunuch leans in and murmurs, "The restoration has been scheduled, Your Majesty." You nod slowly. Good. I don't want it haunting anyone else. The next stop is the aviary. You didn't ask for one, but some previous emperor was obsessed with exotic birds. Now it's your problem. A bright yellow parrot screeches long life at you twice before coughing like a drunk. You move on. Afternoon inspections are more than just sightseeing. They're a reminder, you see everything. Even the cracks in the gazebo. Even the parrot with respiratory issues. It's all part of your realm. And it never sleeps, not even during the golden serenity nap hour. By the time you return to your private quarters, the sun is lowering just enough to give everything a gold tint. The light catches on your robe. A few petals stick to your shoulder. You flick them off, slowly. Next, you say. Your schedule unrolls before you like a scroll thrown at your feet. Guard training. Because what better way to end a nap than with a spear? You change into a lighter robe, still embroidered, still majestic, but designed to allow movement. In theory. In practice, it creaks slightly when you raise your arms, and the sleeves are long enough to hide a falcon. Fashion, even in military matters, bows to imperial presence. The courtyard where the imperial guard trains is massive, enclosed by high walls, lined with red banners that ripple in the breeze like giant, judgmental tongues. Rows of armored soldiers stand in formation, their helmets gleaming like fish scales in the afternoon sun. Spears upright. Eyes forward. Not a twitch among them. You step into the sunlight. The silence thickens. It's not fear. Well, maybe a little. But mostly it's protocol. You, after all, are not just the emperor. You're technically the commander-in-chief of the entire armed forces. Even if you haven't personally led a charge since that staged tiger hunt 3 years ago. The tiger, for the record, was very small. Possibly a sick leopard. A general steps forward and salutes with a practiced clap of the fist to the chest. Your Majesty, he says, the men await your instruction. You nod and try to remember which instruction you gave last time. Was it double spear drills or less yelling in formation? Doesn't matter. They'll do both, probably. You're handed a spear. It's ceremonial, of course, gilded along the shaft, tassels fluttering near the blade like festive warnings. You grip it and step forward, pretending not to feel the slight squeak of your robe as you lift it. You give it a few slow, deliberate swings. The soldiers watch intently. You know they're not judging, exactly. But they are evaluating, can he still do it? Is he still sharp? You finish with a dramatic thrust into the air, hold the pose a second longer than necessary, and lower the weapon. The general claps politely. The soldiers echo it with boot taps. It's a dance. Historians still argue whether emperors of the Tang period maintained real martial prowess or whether these public displays were pure performance, but one surviving instruction manual from the period includes detailed diagrams of stances, one notably titled "The Cloud Pierces the Crooked Star," which sounds less like a military technique and more like something from interpretive dance. The training resumes. Soldiers break into smaller formations, executing spear drills, sword exercises, and shield maneuvers. You watch. You nod. You occasionally comment, "That grip needs correction," or "more angle on the upward sweep." These phrases are vague enough to be useful in any context. You notice one soldier, a younger man with an ill-fitting helmet, fall out of rhythm. His movements are fine, but he's trying too hard. Overcorrecting. Glancing sideways. Nervous. You make a note. Not because he's a threat. But because those are the types who become problems later, not in the courtyard, but in petitions. Or rumors. Or dinner conversations that end with someone asking, "Did you hear what the emperor said about me?" A small demonstration follows. Archers line up, loose arrows at paper targets shaped like demons. The arrows thunk into place with satisfying precision. One hits the target's eyebrow. Unintentionally expressive. The general turns to you. "Would your Majesty care to fire one?" You hesitate. It's been a while. But saying no would look weak, and saying yes comes with the risk of missing the target entirely and becoming a meme before memes existed. You take the bow. It's heavy. Polished wood, horn-backed. Real craftsmanship. The eunuch beside you hands you a single arrow, reverently. You notch it. Draw back. Aim for the center of the paper demon's chest. Release. Thunk. Slightly left of center, but close enough that no one will mention it. There's polite applause. Someone yells divine precision. You almost believe them. And then, in a gesture of either absolute confidence or mild sadism, the general orders a mock skirmish. The guards break into two teams and reenact a border patrol scenario. Spears clash, boots stomp, voices bark out commands. It's noisy, dusty, and theatrical enough to hold your attention. One soldier gets dramatically stabbed and falls to the ground with the flair of a street actor. You raise an eyebrow. He stays down longer than necessary. You know this play. It's loyalty theater. Bleed for the emperor, even if it's fake blood and a borrowed script. Still, it has value. You see who leads well, who follows orders, and who secretly enjoys hitting people a little too much. The match ends. There's bowing, saluting, and someone offers you a victory fan. It's absurdly ornate, painted with dragons eating thunderbolts. You wave it once and set it down. You signal the end of the session. The general nods. The guards bow. You turn and walk back toward the palace, passing rows of men who don't lift their eyes until you've gone. But as you cross the shadowed path beneath the southern gate, a eunuch catches up with you, slightly out of breath. There is a matter, your majesty. A punishment decree awaits your seal. Of course it does. Because what else pairs well with post-nap spear drills? Paperwork. Angry paperwork. You change back into your formal robe, this one slightly stiffer, the collar just tight enough to suggest gravitas. You're led to the Hall of Verdicts, where a stack of bamboo scrolls rests on a reading table. Each one detailing disciplinary measures across the empire, tax evasion, bribery, misconduct, and, one of your favorites, inappropriate poetry submitted to an imperial contest. You read. You frown. You sign. One official will be demoted for intemperate drinking during ancestral rites. Another, exiled to a remote tea province for hoarding ink. A third is to receive 20 lashes for failing to deliver river inspection reports, his punishment lightened because it turns out there was a flood. You pause on one scroll. It's a minor bureaucrat, but the complaint is oddly phrased. Willful disregard of ledger harmony. You raise an eyebrow. Explain, you say. A eunuch murmurs, he rearranged the tax accounts alphabetically. Instead of by rice yield. You blink slowly. Promote him. The eunuch hesitates. Your Majesty. You look up. He tried something new. That's either foolish or brilliant. Either way, he deserves more paper. Historians still argue whether imperial punishments were consistent across reigns or subject to wild mood swings, but stories survive of emperors promoting insolent jesters and exiling boring poets, so who's to say today isn't one of those days? You finish the scrolls. Your hand cramps slightly. Your mood dips, slightly sour from all the bureaucracy and none of the wine. Outside, the sun has dipped below the wall line. Shadows stretch long across the courtyard. You rub your temple and ask, what's next? The eunuch replies, intercepted messages, Your Majesty. Of course. Gossip hour. Because ruling an empire is hard, but eavesdropping? That's the good part. You don't go to the gossip comes to you. In a narrow side chamber scented with sandalwood and secrecy, a lacquered box sits on a stand like a forbidden treasure chest. It's flanked by two officials whose sole job is to read other people's mail. They bow as you enter, but not too low, they're trusted, and besides, you know they've already read everything you're about to hear. You sit. The first letter is unrolled before you, delicately, as though it might bite. It's written in flowery, coded language, the kind favored by court romantics and minor conspirators. Between lines about moonlight on silk and the trembling orchid, one clear message emerges. A concubine is in love. Unfortunately, not with you. Her letter is addressed to a mid-ranking poet in the Ministry of Rights. Scandalous. Mildly. But more importantly, dangerous. Not because of heartbreak, because of alliances. Love affairs lead to gossip. Gossip leads to cliques. Cliques become factions. And factions are the slow poison of palaces. You sigh and set the scroll aside. Keep watching, you say. Don't act. Not yet. The next note is a different tone entirely, stark, hurried brushstrokes, with barely a nod to metaphor. It warns of a merchant guild bribing a tax official in Luoyang. Names are named. Sums are listed. A smaller note is pinned to it, added later by one of your spies, confirming witness saw silver delivered in goosefeather sacks. You murmur, classic goose trick. The eunuchs nod solemnly, pretending this is completely normal. Historians still argue whether Tang emperors maintained direct involvement in intelligence operations or left it to their secretaries. You, however, find it strangely relaxing. There's something deeply satisfying about catching someone trying to be clever and being just cleverer than they are. The third letter is different. It's written in code. A cipher using the classic 9 Phoenix shift, a court favorite during your grandfather's reign. You smile. The decoder panel is brought out, a wooden square covered in rotating tiles, and with a few practiced twists, the message emerges. The jade vessel leaks through cracked lacquer. The red guest drinks at the southern well. The peach does not return the bee's visit. You exhale. That's not just gossip. That's a warning. The jade vessel, always a metaphor for the imperial family. Cracked lacquer. A breach. The red guest, likely a noble from a rival clan. Southern well. A location. Peach and bee. Romance or betrayal. Or both. You say nothing for a long time. Then, have someone check the southern well. Quietly. Yes, Your Majesty. You stand, scrolls fluttering behind you as they're swiftly rolled and locked away. The box is sealed with wax, the flame snuffed. The room feels colder. You step out into the corridor, where the breeze has turned sharper. The lamps have been lit, paper lanterns glowing amber, throwing long, fluttering shadows across the tiled floor. You walk slowly now. Deliberately. Because now, you're thinking. Someone is playing a long game. And you don't know if it's about power, love, revenge, or something dumber, like poetry contests. But someone is moving pieces. And you intend to move faster. Back in your private chambers, your tea is waiting, lukewarm now, but fragrant. You sip absently, watching the steam curl toward the ceiling like thoughts trying to escape. A eunuch enters with a small scroll. You raise an eyebrow. More intrigue. He bows. No, Your Majesty. Tonight's entertainment awaits. You sigh. What is it? A Javanese dance troupe. With drums. Of course it is. You rise slowly. Because there's no rest for emperors. Not even after espionage. The performance takes place in the Hall of Blossoming Sound, which sounds delicate but has the acoustics of a cannon range. You enter to a flurry of bows, gasps, and the quiet jingle of ankle bells. Rows of seated officials and consorts line the edges, fanning themselves with the slow grace of people pretending they don't live in an inferno of palace intrigue. You take your seat, high-backed, carved with cranes and thunderclouds, and nod. The show begins. The dancers are extraordinary. Precise. Spiraling in patterns that make you dizzy just watching. Their costumes shimmer like beetle shells. The lead performer smiles so fiercely you wonder if she's trying to cast a spell or just trying not to slip. Then come the drums. Deep. Thunderous. Pulsing through your spine like a second heartbeat. You try to look regal. You try not to nod in time with the rhythm. You absolutely try not to let your eyelids droop, but the room is warm, the wine has finally arrived, and the cushions under your elbow are a little too soft. Somewhere near the third piece, Dance of the Firewall Dragon, you catch your reflection in a polished bronze tray. Your mouth is open. Slightly. You shut it. Immediately. Historians still argue whether emperors truly enjoyed these elaborate performances or simply endured them as ceremonial obligations. Judging by the number of records describing emperors falling asleep during concerts, you suspect you're not the only one struggling. But there's a pearl. Yes, the pearl. About the size of a pigeon egg. Balanced precariously on a lacquer stand beside you. Supposedly a gift from a southern king, it's said to bring clarity when gazed upon during music. You stare at it. Nothing happens. You keep staring. The music intensifies. The dancers spin. The pearl glows faintly in the lantern light, and suddenly you realize. You haven't moved in 10 minutes. And someone is definitely watching to see if you blink. You blink. You win. Eventually, the final bow is taken. You rise. The court applauds. You nod once, just once, and that nod will be analyzed for days. Was he moved? Was he bored? Was he crying? You weren't. The musicians pack their instruments. The dancers vanish into the hallways like incense smoke. And you're escorted back through your long, quiet corridors. At your side, the chief eunuch clears his throat gently. There's time for one more audience this evening, he says. The Taoist. You close your eyes for a moment. Then open them again. Of course. Because if there's one thing your day needed, after gossip, treason, and performance-induced near-napping, it's mystical prophecies. The sky is darker now, indigo and soft, with a few stars beginning to blink through the high haze. The lanterns along the palace corridor have been replaced with taller, heavier ones, glass-paneled and gently swaying, their oil flames steady despite the breeze. They cast long shadows that flicker like whispers against the carved stone walls. The hall of celestial tranquility awaits. Which, despite its name, contains very little tranquility and quite a lot of incense. As you step inside, the scent hits you first, sandalwood, crushed amber, dried orange peel, and something that may or may not be a burned mushroom. The room is circular, intentionally so, as circles symbolize heaven. The ceiling is painted with swirling constellations, and below them, seated on a cushion that has definitely seen centuries of wear, is the Taoist mystic. He rises slowly, robes cascading around him like fog rolling off a mountain. His beard is long and deliberate. His eyes are partially closed, as if observing something between this realm and a nearby inconvenient one. A silver talisman dangles from his belt, shaped like a bat clutching a peach. You try not to laugh. He bows. Not deeply, but with the kind of nod that says, "We both know I see more than you, but you're technically in charge, so, fine." You take your seat across from him, legs folded in a posture that would probably make a lesser mortal dislocate something. A eunuch steps forward to pour tea, which the mystic promptly ignores. You're not sure if he's fasting or just very dramatic. He speaks softly. There is disturbance in the third tone of the dragon's breath. You blink. Which dragon? He lifts one brow. Your own. Ah. Of course. He lays out objects onto the low table between you, a bronze mirror, 3 polished coins, and what looks very much like a preserved cicada. He rolls the coins between his fingers, then lets them fall with the gravity of fate. Clink. 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 2 heads, 1 tail. He hums. You wait. He finally says, your spirit resonance is not aligned with the wind's memory. You nod slowly, mostly because it feels like the kind of thing that demands a nod. Historians still argue whether Tang emperors genuinely believed in their Taoist consultations or simply used them as political theater. Many did both. The line between mysticism and policy was blurrier than even the best court scribes could ink cleanly. The mystic reaches for the cicada. This creature sleeps 17 years beneath the earth. It emerges, screams, and dies. You frown. Inspiring. He smiles faintly. A reminder, Majesty. Even kings must emerge at the right time, or be crushed by birds. You're not entirely sure if you are the cicada or the bird. Or both. He then produces a silk chart of the stars. Tonight, it seems, there is a conjunction. Jupiter has moved into the realm of the black tortoise, which might signify long journeys, or betrayal, or unusually good weather. It's always a bit vague. You ask, what does this mean for the southern provinces? He closes his eyes. The river flows with secrets. Helpful. You ask, and my cousin? He opens just one eye. The bee has not yet stung. You give up. There's a rhythm to this, a strange waltz between divination and diplomacy. He's not telling you exactly what will happen. He's telling you what you already suspect, wrapped in enough mysticism that it sounds like insight. It's less about seeing the future and more about validating the present. With flair. And yet, there's always a moment, always, that sticks with you. He reaches for the bronze mirror, tilts it slightly toward you. Your reflection appears distorted by age and polish, your face warped slightly, features drawn long like a ghost sketch of you. He says, softly, when the face fades, the empire stumbles. You must remain visible. Even in shadow. That lands. You don't know why. But it does. He folds his chart, gently places the cicada back in its box, and leans forward just a touch. There are storms. I smell them. But you are still the mountain. For now. With that, he stands and bows, slightly deeper than before. You stand too. Your knees crack. The tea remains untouched. The coins glint under the lantern light, now face down. He doesn't flip them. He doesn't need to. You step outside. The air is cooler now. The palace has taken on that odd hush it gets after sunset, when the stone starts to cool and the echoes travel just a little farther. You pass through another corridor, this one lined with panels depicting the 8 immortals, each frozen mid-adventure, drunken sages, flute-playing travelers, women floating on lotuses. You catch your own reflection in the polished bronze of a ceremonial gong. You look tired. Regal, but tired. Back in your private quarters, dinner awaits. Tonight, there's fermented tofu in sesame oil, a delicate soup with chrysanthemum petals, and roasted duck that smells better than you feel. There's wine, of course, served in a jade cup that was supposedly carved by blind monks in the mountains. It feels a little sticky. You eat slowly. The food is good, but your mind is elsewhere, circling the mystic's words like a hawk that's not sure if it's hunting or just bored. For dessert, there's a small tray of candied lotus root. You nibble one, realize it's too sweet, and place it down. A eunuch silently removes the tray, as if to erase the mistake entirely. Then comes the wine meant for digestion, a cloudy, fermented rice wine, warmed slightly. It smells like sour peaches and old promises. You sip. The room spins. Slightly. You lean back, staring at the ceiling, painted cranes gliding in perfect circles. You wonder, briefly, if they ever get dizzy up there. You close your eyes. And for a moment, just one flicker of a second, you wish you could trade places with the cicada. Emerge, scream, and disappear. But instead, you're the mountain. For now. The evening deepens into night, and with it comes a silence so complete it almost roars. You sit alone in the pavilion of clear stars, the sky above open through a wide octagonal skylight. A cold breeze brushes against your face. You don't flinch. This is the part of the day you both dread and crave, the time when the world no longer demands performance but refuses to grant peace. When even the most perfumed distractions fade, and all that's left is the empire, and the stars. Tonight, the astronomers have gathered. They're an odd bunch. Thin, pale, with the faintly sunken eyes of men who stare into the heavens more than the world around them. They arrive with their charts, their bamboo sighting tubes, their hushed urgency. You know the type, people who think more in star maps than in people. But they matter. Because they see the omens first. You recline in your chair, sipping the last of your rice wine, as the chief astronomer steps forward and bows so low you think he might fall into his own robes. Your Majesty, he begins, the sky is unsettled. Of course it is. He unrolls a long parchment, weighed at the corners with stones etched in astrological glyphs. You lean forward, pretending you can make sense of the maze of lines and dots. To be fair, you recognize Orion. Everything else looks like someone tried to predict fate with spilled ink. He points. This star here, part of the White Tiger constellation, has dimmed. Significantly. This is traditionally associated with military strength. You raise an eyebrow. Whose? He hesitates. Possibly ours. Ah. The next assistant steps in. In the east, near the Azure Dragon, there's a new light. We believe it is a guest star, what the ancients called a broom star. Translation, a comet. Historians still argue whether Tang astronomers truly understood the nature of comets or whether their records were symbolic. But we know this much, they were terrified of them. They called them sky brooms, because they swept away the old. And not gently. You lean back, feeling the chill settle deeper into your bones. A comet, you say. Has it changed color yet? No, Your Majesty. Then we still have time. Time for what? You don't say. You don't need to. Everyone in the room is thinking it. Plagues, rebellions, assassinations, comets have been blamed for all of them. And sometimes, just sometimes, the sky's accusations turn out to be accurate. A junior astronomer, too young to know how to hide fear properly, says, it passed over the southern provinces last night. Of course it did. The southern provinces again. With their suspicious tea traders, coded letters, and murmuring rivers. You resist the urge to sigh. You reach for another cup of wine. It's empty. A eunuch fills it, ghost-like, then vanishes again. Outside, the stars are blazing, brighter than they should be. You wonder if they're always this intense, or if it's just that no one ever dares to look this hard. You rise. The astronomers fall back, murmuring oaths of respect. You step up to the edge of the pavilion where the wall drops away slightly, revealing a small platform just beneath the skylight. A place where emperors can stand and pretend they're closer to the divine. You look up. You try not to look for signs. But you do. Is that constellation misaligned? Does that faint flicker mean anything? You think of that cicada in its box, and for a second, you feel smaller than even that. Because you are a man in a robe, staring at fire from millions of miles away, hoping it doesn't mean him. You glance over your shoulder. Prepare a proclamation, you say. Addressing the comet. The chief astronomer blinks. What should it say, Your Majesty? That I've seen it. That I am not afraid of it. And that the Empire has no need to be, either. The man nods, bowing twice. Wise, Majesty. Very wise. It's not wise. It's preemptive. It's the kind of thing emperors say to distract from the fact that they are, in fact, absolutely terrified. You return to your seat. A eunuch places a warm towel over your shoulders. The astronomers begin quietly discussing planetary retrogrades in the corner, like they're trying to solve a riddle written in wind. Then someone brings you a scroll. Not from the heavens, but from the archives. You recognize it instantly. It's one of your father's final edicts, written in a shaky, fading hand. His last months were not kind. His words had the clarity of a cracked mirror, scattered truths, veiled regrets. You read it again, now, with a fresh chill in your spine. The stars will come and go. The throne sits heavy in light and dark. My son must learn to pretend, until he no longer must. You fold the scroll. You remember that night. The way his eyes looked right through you. You take a deep breath and say, Bring me the imperial seal. The eunuchs pause. It's late. This isn't the hour for edicts. This is the hour for candles and regrets. But they obey. The seal arrives, massive, square, carved from pure jade, its base etched with the words, Mandate of Heaven. Everlasting rule. You don't stamp anything. Not yet. You just place your hand on it. Solid. Cold. Eternal. And you think, the heavens may flicker, the stars may warn, but the hand that holds the seal, that's what they'll remember. That's what endures. You finally rise. Enough for tonight, you say. The astronomers bow. The eunuchs scatter to send coded whispers to the far provinces. You walk the silent path back to your quarters, flanked only by wind and memory. The sky still looms above. But now you're beneath a roof again. Human. Tired. Still awake. You don't head straight to bed. That would imply peace, or satisfaction, or the luxury of a clean conscience, none of which you're currently entitled to. Instead, you go to your study, a narrow chamber lit by 6 tall candles and one nervous-looking eunuch who clearly drew the short straw tonight. The table is already prepared. A fresh pot of ink. A trimmed brush. Scrolls arranged with obsessive symmetry. You don't sit yet. You just stand in the doorway, watching the shadows dance across the floor, and you feel that familiar pressure building again behind your temples, not pain, exactly, just presence. The weight of a day stacked on top of all the days before it. Bring the scrolls, you say. The eunuch bows and rushes off, returning moments later with a bundle of them tied in crimson ribbon. These are the final orders. The last checks. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of tiny decrees that keep an empire from wobbling in its sleep. You sit. The chair creaks. The first scroll is unfurled, an official request to redirect rice barges from one canal route to another. It sounds simple, but it's never just logistics. It's about which governor gets to brag, which clan gets the shipping contracts, which local shrine receives the leftover donations of rice husk. You sign. Next, an education request. A provincial family wants the right to send its daughters to a Confucian temple school usually reserved for boys. Brave. Slightly scandalous. You pause. Historians still argue whether such progressive requests were common or whether only the boldest ever made it to the throne, but you suspect most never even reached this table. You nod to yourself and approve it. Quietly. With a small side note, do not announce publicly. You work through 5 more, grain allocations, a trade dispute involving sandalwood fraud, you make a note to never smell a sandalwood scroll again, and a particularly enthusiastic debate over fish tax exemptions. Then comes the last one. It's not new. It's a poem. Written over a century ago by Emperor Xuanzong, your great-grandfather. You've read it before, but tonight, it's been placed among the orders, as if the ghosts of emperors past are asking you to take a hint. In candlelight, I see her face. The years between us drift like snow. I ruled the world, yet missed her grace. A kingdom's loss I'll never show. It's about Yang Guifei, of course, his most beloved consort. His greatest mistake. His heaviest grief. You read it again. And for once, you don't analyze. You don't annotate. You don't wonder if the brushstrokes were his or a calligrapher's. You just sit with it. Because the thing about being emperor is, you inherit more than land and titles. You inherit the regrets too. They live here. In the walls. In the scrolls. In the moments before sleep when silence is no longer a gift, but a reckoning. You set the poem down. The eunuch approaches with one last item, your sleep scroll. It's ceremonial, mostly. A scroll signed by the emperor each night to signal the end of business. A symbolic pause in governance, as if the empire needs your permission to dream. You sign it. And just like that, the day closes. Almost. You rise and head toward the candle stand. You take one in your hand, carefully, the wax already warm through the bronze base, and begin your final walk of the night. The path leads through the personal wing of your residence, quiet as a prayer. You pass paintings of mountains, real and imagined. Carvings of tigers. Portraits of ancestors whose eyes seem to follow you with varying degrees of judgment. You enter the Hall of Eternal Scrolls. It's smaller than the great archives, more intimate. This is where you keep personal copies of poems, letters, portraits, and imperial reflections, your own, and those of rulers before you. Tonight, you light the incense burner, set the candle down, and kneel. Not to pray. To read. One scroll in particular calls to you. It's labeled in delicate, faded characters, Autumn Thoughts in Exile. Written by Emperor Zhongzong during his banishment, before he clawed his way back to the throne. It's not refined. It's raw. He wrote about missing the palace food, the warmth of silk bedding, and the way the wind sounded when it passed through palace corridors. And most heartbreakingly, the silence of no longer being feared. You sit with that. Let it settle in your chest. Because someday, your name may sit on this same shelf. With or without a crown. And someone like you, a future shadow emperor, will kneel, and read, and wonder what kind of man you really were. You rise, candle flickering in your hand, and extinguish the incense. Your steps are slower now. Heavier. But the act of reading, the whispers of those before you, has steadied something inside you. You return to your chamber. There are no guards inside. Only 2 eunuchs who bow and leave the moment you enter. The room is simple, for an emperor, dark wood, silk screens, a single ceramic bowl of plum blossoms placed beside your bed. The bed itself is raised, firm, and draped in sheer silk. The pillow is round and unforgiving. The sheets smell faintly of herbs and something vaguely medicinal. You're told it's meant to prolong vitality. It mostly prolongs neck pain. You undress slowly, folding each layer of robe as if you might not need it tomorrow. You lie down. A candle remains lit at your bedside. You watch the flame, the way it leans and dances, then recovers. You wonder if it dreams. The palace is utterly quiet now. Outside, the wind stirs a distant chime. You breathe. And try not to think about the dancing bear, the intercepted love notes, the comet, or your cousin who definitely wants your job. Instead, you stare into the soft golden light and whisper aloud a line from a scroll you once copied as a child. The stars above do not command. They merely witness. Then you close your eyes. And hope they blink. You wake before the sun. Not because you have to, technically, you could delay the start of the day with a single gesture, but because your body now rises with the palace itself. Sleep doesn't hold you tightly anymore. Not after so many years of half-dreams tangled in scrolls and whispers. Not when the empire sighs in its sleep like a restless animal. There's a faint shuffling outside your chamber, servants prepping warm water, guards swapping shifts, eunuchs murmuring the day's plan with the reverence of priests reciting prophecy. You lie still for a moment, staring up at the silk canopy above your bed. It's embroidered with stars. Not symbolic ones, actual constellations. The imperial seamstresses spent months getting the placements right. You once joked they missed Orion's elbow. No one laughed. You rise. No ceremony this time. No pageantry. You dress in a practical robe, deep indigo with gold trim, easier to move in, easier to sweat in. Because today, you've scheduled something very specific. A surprise inspection of the kitchen? Nope. An imperial visit to the silk workshops? Not quite. Today, you're sparring with the imperial guard. Not watching. Sparring. And not because you're trying to impress anyone, though let's be honest, you wouldn't mind if the general looked mildly terrified. It's because there's something maddening about spending your life as a symbol. Every once in a while, you want to be the body behind the dragon seal. You want to feel the grip of a sword in your palm and remember what real movement feels like. Outside in the courtyard, the morning air is cool, still heavy with night. You arrive to find the guard already assembled, 2 rows of armored men standing so still they could be statues carved from discipline. Spears at their sides. Swords sheathed. Helmets polished to mirror your reflection back at you. The general, who has seen you through war games and diplomatic dinners alike, bows low. Your Majesty, he says carefully, we've prepared the training ground. Of course they have. It's been swept clean, sand raked into concentric circles, practice weapons lined neatly on stands as if awaiting a royal whisper. You nod. They hand you a wooden jian, a straight practice sword, still solid enough to break a bone if used without care. You give it a few test swings. It's heavier than you remember, but not unfamiliar. Your sparring partner is a captain, mid-30s, built like someone who wrestles tigers for fun and then writes poems about it. He bows deeply, respectfully, but there's a flicker in his eye. A challenge. You approve. You begin. The clash of wood echoes across the courtyard. The guards do not flinch. The eunuchs, watching from the shade, look concerned enough to write emergency memorials. You move through the forms, downward strikes, feints, reversals. You're out of practice, of course. You miss a block. The captain taps your shoulder with a clean, quick jab. You pause. He bows again. Apologies, Majesty. You grin. Again. You move faster this time. Let instinct override etiquette. You were trained as a boy, before the throne made you cautious, before every step and breath became symbolic. And now, for just a few minutes, you're not a scroll signer, not a poem approver, not a divine son of heaven. You're just a man trying to land a blow with a stick. You don't land one. But you dodge 2. Eventually, you call for rest. You're sweating, breathing hard, your robe sticking to your back in ways no imperial garment should. But it feels earned. You wave away the attendant with the perfumed towel and wipe your face with your own sleeve. Let them talk. The general approaches. The men will speak of this for months, Majesty. You smirk. Let them add flourishes. They always do. You watch the soldiers return to their drills. One of them, still young, glances your way. You give the slightest nod. His back straightens immediately, like someone lit a torch under his spine. And just like that, the spell ends. Back to the palace. Back to the schedule. You return to your quarters, where breakfast waits. A smaller meal today, sweet rice porridge with slices of pear, a boiled egg, pickled mustard greens. You eat in silence, watching a spider repair its web in the corner of the window lattice. It works quickly, methodically, as if it knows you're watching. Then, the post-sparring inspection tour. You're led to a portion of the palace most don't see, the servant quarters and maintenance workshops. You walk with your hands folded behind your back, robe refastened into something vaguely formal, trying not to show that your legs still ache from swordplay. You pass the linen rooms, bolts of silk hung like prayer flags, dye pots steaming faintly. One older seamstress bows deeply, her hand stained crimson to the wrists. You pause. Her embroidery depicts dragons circling a mountain. Is that new? You ask. She nods. For your winter robe, Majesty. You look again. The dragon's eye is threaded with gold. It gleams slightly as the light hits it. Add a second mountain, you say. Make it look like the dragon is choosing between them. She bows again, smiling faintly. She knows it's not just design advice. It's metaphor. You move on. Through the carpenter's hall, where wooden screens are carved with such delicate latticework that one wrong chisel could shatter a week's labor. Through the kitchens, where cooks pretend not to panic at your sudden appearance, and one boy drops a ladle into a boiling pot and then tries to retrieve it with a towel. You pretend not to notice. Through the tea storerooms, where bricks of compressed leaf are stacked like currency. Everywhere you go, they bow. They smile. They sweat. Because while the court sees your decisions, these people see the results. If the empire is a body, this is its heartbeat. Quiet, unnoticed, essential. You return at last to your study. A fresh towel. A bowl of warm water. Another robe. A scroll delivered from the eastern provinces, complaining of locusts. But you're not done yet. Because one of your messengers arrives, panting, with a folded slip of paper. You open it. And smile. The southern well has been checked. The bee is still hovering. But the peach tree. It's been moved. You're back at your desk, but this time, the scrolls are edged in black ink, the administrative color of consequences. Punishments. You take a breath. This part of ruling isn't fun. It's not ceremonial, not poetic, not wrapped in incense or philosophy. It's the cold spine of the throne. The steel rod in the center of all that silk and gold. This is where you sign names off the imperial registry. This is where reputations shatter like dropped porcelain. And today, the pile is thick. The top scroll details a minor official in a river province who's been assigning grain taxes according to how neatly the villagers write their names. You blink, reread the line, and realize, he's rewarding calligraphy with reduced taxation. You mutter, creative. You pause. You don't want to crush innovation entirely, but rewarding elegant handwriting over actual rice production. Not great governance. Demote him, you say aloud, but transfer him to the Imperial Academy. Maybe he can teach penmanship. A eunuch nods and makes the mark. Next, An official who's been hoarding ceremonial wine meant for ancestor festivals. Over 100 jars hidden in a storage house, discovered when a goat wandered in and got aggressively drunk during a village inspection. Reassign him, you say. To the furthest tea field. No wine. Only mosquitoes. A third scroll comes forward, this one more serious. An accusation of bribery involving 3 low-level scribes and a warehouse inspector. It's messy, unclear. Too many rumors, not enough facts. You press your fingers to your temples. Investigate further. Quietly. If it's true. I want a public apology scroll. Written in their own blood. A eunuch freezes. You look up, deadpan. Ink. I meant ink. Probably. You keep going. Historians still argue whether Tang emperors micromanaged local punishments or delegated entirely to regional governors, but most evidence suggests a mix, light touches with sharp interruptions. You prefer to show up just often enough to keep everyone guessing. You pause over one scroll. It's thinner. Not bureaucratic. Personal. A petition from a widow. Her husband died on a public works project, and she's requesting back pay for his labor so she can raise their 2 children. It's written in plain characters, no poetic flourish. Just honesty. You fold it slowly. Approve the request. And double it. From my own reserve. The eunuchs murmur, impressed. Or alarmed. Maybe both. You stand, needing air. The windows are open, the breeze smells like jasmine and ink. But the real world calls again. You're expected in the outer courtyard. Another punishment, but this one you'll witness in person. It's not always your style, but sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes, your face is more powerful than any decree. You walk with purpose, robes rustling like pages turning too quickly. The outer courtyard is already arranged, guards flanking a square of polished stone, a crowd of officials pretending not to be excited, and a young man on his knees in the center, staring fixedly at the ground. He's the one who leaked documents to the Western Court, a cousin's faction. Minor papers, but enough to show intent. Enough to show betrayal. You know him. Or rather, you knew him. You remember when he recited poetry during a banquet and blushed when he forgot a line. Now he's shaking. The general steps forward. He confesses. He begs forgiveness. You say nothing. Because this moment isn't about rage, it's about message. One betrayal can ripple through the ranks. And silence, here, is louder than shouting. You walk a slow circle around him. He doesn't move. You stop behind him. The crowd holds its breath. Finally, you speak. Let him keep his life. Strip his rank. Send him to the archives in Dunhuang. Let him copy dusty scrolls until his fingers remember loyalty. There's no cheering. Just relief. And dread. The guards haul him up. He doesn't meet your eyes. Which is fine. You're not in the mood to be met. You return inside. Another robe change. Lighter this time. You've been sitting in punishment all morning, and it clings to the skin like a curse. In the privacy of your quarters, you glance at your reflection in the water basin. You look tired. Not in the way sleep cures. In the way that builds. There's a knock. A eunuch enters, clutching a folded note. You open it. The handwriting is flowery. Feminine. Intricate enough to be innocent, but you know better. It's a love poem. But it's not for you. Another concubine. Another note. Another message intercepted before it could reach its actual recipient, a junior historian assigned to the palace archives. Of all the people, the poem is bad. If I were ink, I'd spill myself across your fingers. You grimace. She deserves exile just for that metaphor. The eunuch smirks. You raise an eyebrow. He bows too quickly. What do we know about her? You ask. She's ambitious. Charming. Tends to walk too close to firelight. And the historian? Terrified. Still a virgin, according to gossip. You sigh. Separate them. Send her to the Lotus Pavilion for a month. Assign him to the temple records. Far from each other. A pause. Also, you add, give her a poetry tutor. A good one. The eunuch bows again, then disappears. The scroll still lies open on your desk. You reread it, almost amused. But mostly, weary. You lean back in your chair, staring at the ceiling. You wonder how many emperors before you read their enemies' love letters. How many sat exactly where you are, both the judge and the joke. Outside, bells begin to chime. Evening approaches. Soon, dancers. Music. Theatrics. But for now, you allow yourself one moment of stillness. One moment where no scroll needs signing, no betrayal needs naming. Just you. And a ridiculous love poem. And a kingdom that refuses to sleep. The shadows stretch longer across the marble floors as you make your way to the pavilion of whispered petals. The name sounds delicate, poetic, almost too perfect. That's because it is. The real reason the place exists isn't flowers or peace or whispering. It's gossip. You step inside. The lanterns are already lit, casting their amber glow across lacquered walls painted with serene scenes of cranes, plum trees, and polite lies. Cushions are arranged in small clusters, low tables hold steaming tea and dried fruit, and the scent of osmanthus clings faintly in the air like a half-remembered secret. The concubines are gathered here tonight. Not all, just a rotation. Enough to fill the room, but not enough to start a war. You know the selection is curated by the senior eunuchs and, unofficially, the empress herself. Which means every glance, every sleeve twitch, every sip of tea is part of a larger strategy you're supposed to ignore and also somehow completely control. They rise when you enter, bowing like petals caught in the wind. Silk sleeves flutter. Eyelashes lower. One of them, Lady Min, murmurs a greeting so soft it's practically a suggestion. You nod and take your place at the center table. You're handed a cup of tea, light, fragrant, almost too hot to hold. A delicately carved tray of candied lotus seeds appears, as if by magic. You pick one up, bite it in half, and chew slowly. Everyone watches. This is the game. Lady Zhou, yes, slipper-thieving Lady Zhou, breaks the silence with a question, Your Majesty, did the comet appear again last night? She's testing you. You smile. It did. It blinked at me. A few giggles ripple across the room. Lady Su adds, perhaps it's admiring your calligraphy. You glance at her. Then it's nearsighted. The laughter now is genuine, or expertly faked, which, in this context, amounts to the same thing. But even as the room fills with soft voices and delicate gestures, you notice what's not being said. Who sits next to whom? Who pours tea for whom? Which poem is quoted and which name is conspicuously absent? This is court politics at its most dangerous, scented, smiling, and dressed in embroidered slippers. A eunuch brings over a folded note on a lacquer tray. You raise an eyebrow. He bows and whispers, Anonymous, Your Majesty. Of course it is. You open it. The handwriting is precise, someone trained in palace etiquette. Inside is a single line. The plum tree bends toward the southern wall. That's it. No name. No seal. Just enough implication to ignite a small fire. In this case, plum tree is often used as a nickname for Lady Jean. Southern wall might suggest the scholar's quarters. Again. Either this is a continuation of the previous scandal, or a framing attempt. You sigh. Out loud this time. Lady Min notices. She leans forward just a bit. Bad news, Your Majesty. You smile without showing your teeth. Just poetry. And plum trees. Ah, she says, hiding her amusement behind her fan. So many poems bloom in winter, don't they? You make a mental note, she knows. Whether she started it or not is unclear. But she knows. Historians still argue whether palace intrigue among concubines shaped major political decisions or merely provided entertainment for the eunuchs, but considering the number of high-ranking officials who rose or fell because of whispered names in pavilions like this, you suspect the answer is both. You listen for a while longer. Let them circle each other in metaphor. A discussion about embroidery turns into a veiled insult. A compliment about hairstyle morphs into a dig at someone's seasonal complexion. It's like a dance made of daggers. Wrapped in silk. Then, you catch something interesting. Lady Yuan is laughing. But she's not looking at you, she's looking at a eunuch across the room. Very subtly. But enough. And that eunuch? He's the one with the lazy eye. You remember now. Someone mentioned him in an intercepted scroll. He's the one they suspected of serving your uncle. You sip your tea and speak lightly, Lady Yuan, that fan of yours is very fine. From your home province? She stiffens. Just slightly. Yes, Majesty. It was a gift from my uncle. The same province your uncle governs. Of course it was. You nod, pleasant. Harmless. Forgettable. And immediately make a note, both she and the eunuch need watching. You stand. The room rises with you. Everyone bows again. You offer a nod that's almost warm. Almost. Then you turn and leave. Outside, the air is cooler. Crisper. You exhale, feeling your shoulders drop. For a moment, you're alone with the stars again. You wonder if anyone else in the world is managing a government by monitoring flotation levels and fan distribution. Probably not. Back in your chambers, you remove your robe slowly, exchanging it for a lighter silk one dyed in midnight blue. A small brazier burns in the corner, warming the room with the scent of cedar. Another eunuch appears with your evening scroll, just one this time. You read it. It's from the Empress. Her handwriting is firm, elegant, and sharp as a blade beneath brocade. Lady Yuan grows too bold. She forgets whose shadow she walks in. I will remind her. You smirk. You write back, gently. We still need her shade. You seal it. Pass it back. The eunuch bows and vanishes like a puff of smoke. The palace settles again into quiet. But it's not rest. Not yet. Because now comes the real performance. The evening music. Tonight, the dancers come from the western provinces, Uzbek silks, jangling belts, deep drums that vibrate through the bone. You sit through it all. Smile when expected. Nod when the music crescendos. Clap once, precisely, at the end. The dancers bow. The courtiers exhale. Someone mentions the moon. You glance up at it. Full, bright, unblinking. And you think, everyone here wears a mask. Yours just weighs more. The final notes of the evening's performance echo softly off the carved beams of the Hall of Resonant Harmony. The dancers are still bowing, robes stilling, breath heaving from beneath jeweled veils. You rise slowly, offering the smallest nod of appreciation. That's all they'll get tonight. Enough to be remembered. Not enough to feel comfortable. You exit before the applause fades. You've had enough pageantry for one evening. Enough tea. Enough plum tree metaphors. Enough smiles that hide ambitions sharper than any dagger in the armory. You make your way through a narrow corridor behind the hall, a shortcut rarely used, lined with ancient stone murals depicting the 8 Taoist immortals. Each one frozen mid-miracle, their stone eyes forever tilted upward. You glance at one, the one with the fan that calms storms, and whisper, if you're listening, feel free to start with my court. You round the corner and emerge into a quieter courtyard. Moonlight pools across the stone tiles, pale as spilled milk. A breeze stirs the bamboo fronds, their shadows swaying like dancers long after the music has stopped. Waiting at the edge of the courtyard is the Taoist mystic from earlier. He bows without a word. You gesture for him to speak. He does not. Instead, he steps forward and presses something into your palm. A stone. Smooth, round, cold. Engraved with a single character, quiet. You look at him. He smiles. Even mountains need silence to remember they are not sky. You nod. Tuck the stone into your sleeve. He vanishes into the dark with all the subtlety of incense smoke retreating from flame. You return to your chambers. But before you can sit, a eunuch appears at the door, holding something wrapped in white silk. A gift, your majesty. Anonymous. That word again. You unfold the cloth. Inside is a pearl. No. The pearl. The one from the earlier performance, the one displayed on its lacquered pedestal during the Javanese dance. But this one isn't for display. It's drilled. Strung on a thread of gold. A necklace. You raise an eyebrow. Attached is a single card, scented faintly with jasmine and ink. Just one line. Even the emperor needs to shine, sometimes. No name. No seal. But you know exactly who sent it. Lady Min, clever, quiet Lady Min. The one who watches but rarely speaks. The one who asked about the comet, but didn't press. The one who didn't try too hard. You smirk. And yet, there's danger in that necklace. Historians still argue whether late-night gifts to Tang emperors were romantic gestures, bribes, or opening moves in dynastic chess. Sometimes they were all three. You set the pearl down gently on your writing desk, next to a folded draft of a speech you'll probably never give. Your eyes flick to the candle. Still burning. You dip your brush. On a new scroll, in your cleanest hand, you write. The moon shows only one face. The emperor must wear several. You let the ink dry naturally. No servants. No blotting cloth. You watch it fade into permanence. Then, movement. A eunuch rushes in, pale, out of breath. Urgent matter, your majesty. Of course there is. He hands you a folded message with a wax seal, red, unbroken. From the northern border. You break it open. The report is crisp. Dry. Too many facts. Too little poetry. Which usually means the situation is real. Riders spotted near the Yellow Ridge. Unknown banners. Movement observed for 3 days. No confrontation yet. Patrols uneased. Requesting guidance. You read it twice. Unknown banners. 3 days. That's not wandering nomads. That's intention. You roll the scroll slowly, set it aside. Dispatch a coded reply. Double the patrols. Alert the closest garrison. Quietly. Yes, Your Majesty. The eunuch vanishes again. You sit. Hands clasped. The room is silent now, so silent you hear the faint scratching of the wind across the tiled roof. You stare at the unstrung pearl, still glinting under candlelight like a held breath. You think about Lady Min. You think about the peach tree that moved. You think about the bee that hasn't stung. And now, banners. Riders. Edges fraying in 3 directions. You rise. Not out of alarm. Out of ritual. You light another stick of incense. Not the thick ceremonial kind, but a thin one, your father's favorite. It smells like cedar and wet stone. You breathe it in and feel your spine straighten slightly. This is why the throne is never truly empty. This is why the seal never cools. Because the performance continues even after the dancers have gone. There's one last task tonight. You retrieve a scroll from a locked drawer. One you wrote months ago but never sent. A letter to the general in the north. You edit it, just 2 lines. You add. Observe. Do not provoke. Report every movement, no matter how still it looks. You reseal it. Hand it to your most trusted messenger, an older eunuch who's written for you before. He bows without needing explanation. He's gone within minutes. And now the hall is empty again. Finally. You return to your bedchamber. Remove the robe. Sit on the edge of the bed. Then you do something you haven't done in weeks. You take off your ring. The imperial seal ring. Gold, heavy, worn on your right index finger. You place it on the low table beside your bed. Just for tonight. Because tomorrow, the banners might mean nothing. Or everything. But tonight, just for a little while. You want to sleep with only your own thoughts beside you. The candlelight flickers gently as the ring rests beside your bed, still gleaming like a little sun too proud to set. You sit in silence for a long moment, your bare hand feeling oddly light, like you've just taken off the empire itself. And yet, rest doesn't come. Because tonight's not done. You're reminded of this when another knock sounds, not rushed this time, but deliberate, time to let you know the person on the other side expects to be invited in. You don't speak. The door opens anyway. It's the Taoist. Not the cryptic one from earlier, but a different mystic, this one older, thinner, his robes less theatrical and more worn with the scent of travel and sweat and ash. His beard is frayed at the ends. His sandals look like they've survived dynasties. He bows deeply. You nod, motion for him to sit, and he does so without a word. He doesn't wait for tea. He doesn't pretend to flatter. Which is how you know this is real. He opens a bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Inside, a set of bone tiles, each carved with ancient characters, older than the empire itself. He lays them out in a rough circle on the rug before you. One by one, his thin fingers nudge the tiles into position. His joints crack. His breath whistles slightly with age. Then he looks up at you. His eyes are cloudy, but steady. You have questions, he says. You raise an eyebrow. Which ones did you hear? He shrugs. The ones you haven't asked yet. You smirk. That's fair. He gestures toward the bone tiles. Touch one. You hesitate. Not because you're afraid of fortune-telling, but because in this place, at this hour, when the world holds still, you almost believe it works. You touch a tile. It clicks under your finger. He flips it over. The character glows faintly in the candlelight, to shift, to move, to change. Of course. The mystic grunts. Change is not the same as choice. You nod slowly. Tell me something I don't know. He grins, toothless. You know too much already. Then he leans forward, closer than most would dare. His voice drops to a whisper so soft, you wonder if your ancestors are straining to hear it. You fear losing control, he says. But the real danger is not letting it go when you must. You look at the bone tiles again. One has a crack through it. Another has ink smudges so old they might be fingerprints of the first emperor to consult them. He gathers them silently, rewraps the bundle, and sets it in your lap. For you, he says. You'll know when to use them. You blink. You're giving me prophecy bones. He chuckles. No. I'm giving you doubt. Something emperors avoid too easily. You stare at him for a long moment. Finally, why now? He doesn't answer. Just rises slowly, bows again, and disappears into the corridor like smoke through a cracked wall. You're alone again. With the bones. With your thoughts. You tuck the bundle away in a drawer beside your writing kit. Not because you believe in them. But because you believe in having them close. Just in case. It's fully night now. Still no rest. You step out onto the small private terrace attached to your chamber. From here, you can see the roofline of the outer palace, the flickering lights of sentry posts, and, beyond that, the black silhouettes of distant trees. Above, the moon is high, round, cold. Then you notice something. A faint glow to the south. You squint. Not a fire. Not a comet. A lantern procession. Silent. Controlled. Your southern ministers arrived early. You were expecting them tomorrow. You smile grimly. They're here to negotiate. Or warn you. Or plead for resources. Or stall. They never travel at night unless they want to catch you off guard, or prove that they're willing to be uncomfortable for your attention. You whisper, well, then. You call for your attendant. He arrives, robes rustling, bowing before he's fully through the door. Tell the Empress, you say, that our southern guests are already lighting their candles. Yes, Your Majesty. He's gone in seconds. You don't go back to bed. You walk to the mirror in your dressing chamber. Look at your reflection. Still no ring on your hand. Still that glimmer in your eyes. Still the Emperor. You say nothing. But inside, you begin assembling your strategy, like moving tiles, only these ones bleed. You return to your writing table and unroll a fresh scroll. This one won't be sealed. Not yet. You dip your brush and begin writing, not commands, not edicts, but questions. What does the South want that they haven't asked for? Who gains if the comet strikes now? Why was the message about the peach tree written in a woman's hand? What has the Empress not said lately? The ink pools slowly in the flickering candlelight. The scroll grows heavy with unsent answers. You pause only when a night bird calls once, sharply, outside your window. A moment later, another call answers. Code. You stand. The guards outside your door stir, but you wave them off. One of them, a young one, looks nervous. You like that. He hasn't grown numb yet. You walk to the outer hall. A messenger waits there, wrapped in the gray cloak of the silent courier guild. No words. He kneels and hands you a scrap of silk. You open it. The banner's moved. Just that. You inhale. Exhale. You say to the guards, ready the west chamber. Tomorrow morning, I want maps of the frontier provinces. And the name of every officer whose uncle owns a horse farm. They don't ask why. They just bow and run. You return inside. The candle finally gutters. You relight it. Sleep can wait. Dawn comes without asking. You don't notice it at first, the glow slipping beneath the lattice shutters, the faint shift in bird calls, the breeze warming just slightly. You're still at your desk, brush in hand, halfway through a list of governors who've spent more on ceremonial robes this year than on irrigation repairs. A highlight reel of priorities, really. A eunuch enters and clears his throat softly. The kitchen awaits instruction, Your Majesty. Right. Breakfast. You nod, and the scrolls are gathered, ink dried and whisked away as if the night never happened. But it did. You feel it in your back, your shoulders, your skull. The robes today are lighter, spring green with gold stitching, understated but imperial. The belt clinks softly with each step. You wear the ring again. It feels heavier than it did 2 nights ago. The morning meal is laid out in the private hall, steamed rice cakes, pickled ginger, fried bean curd, and a soup. You lift the lid and hesitate. It's a milky broth, thick with roots and herbs and something unidentifiable that smells faintly like boiled sandalwood. You look up. The eunuch bows. Prescribed by the court physician. To settle the spirit. With Cotinopsis root. And fermented willow. You sigh. And courage. He lowers his head. A trace of cinnamon. You try a spoonful. It tastes like regret and floor polish. But you drink it anyway. Because digestion is also political. A senior attendant approaches. The southern delegation awaits. Of course they do. You rise, teeth tingling from the soup. Outside, the palace is waking up, cicadas humming, guards repositioning, scribes trailing after ministers like anxious ducklings. The southern ministers wait in the hall of river harmony. You chose it deliberately. Its floor tiles depict tributaries merging into a central basin, just like the political map you keep hidden in your study. Symbolism helps. It reminds everyone where the water flows. They bow as you enter. There are 4 of them, led by Minister who looks like he hasn't slept either. His robes are immaculate. His smile is not. Your Majesty, he begins, we bring humble greetings and good tidings from the lower provinces. You sit. You nod. You don't smile. Tea is poured. He continues. The roads are repaired. The crops have begun their second sprouting. The people rejoice under your benevolence. You raise one brow. And yet, you arrived at midnight. He hesitates. We had concerns too delicate for the courier system. Of course you did. They present documents, weather reports, flood control plans, tax tallies, all designed to look like praise but subtly loaded with requests. More silver for canals. Fewer tax inspections. One scroll even dares to suggest regional discretion in military deployments. You unroll it, read it slowly, then glance up. You wish to move troops without my seal. Only to preserve speed, Your Majesty. The terrain. You cut him off. Speed is rarely needed unless someone is already behind. Silence. The other ministers look down. One coughs into his sleeve. You set the scroll aside. You've done well managing the river, you say. But you've forgotten that tributaries do not choose their own delta. A pause. Then Minister who bows again, deeper this time. Of course. We are merely its keepers. You sip your tea. It's bitter. They retreat with rehearsed gratitude, leaving behind 2 crates of gifts from the region, preserved plums, calligraphy brushes, and one disturbingly lifelike duck sculpture carved from sandalwood. You'll assign someone to inspect it for hidden compartments. You return to your chambers just in time for the midday lull. This time, no nap. Instead, you sit in the eastern garden pavilion, watching the koi swirl under the pond's surface like slow-moving omens. A tray of dried apricots sits untouched beside you. You nibble one. It tastes slightly sour, which fits the mood. The Empress joins you. She sits without a word. Her robe today is deep red, unembellished. Her hair is pinned with only one jade stick. A quiet signal. She's here for strategy, not ceremony. You handled them well, she says. You listened. Always. You nod. She adds, they'll retreat for now. But they'll send others. Hungrier ones. You look toward the koi. Then we feed them more bait. Enough to keep them near the surface. She raises her cup. But not enough to let them leap the edge. Exactly. Historians still argue whether Tang empresses wielded influence behind closed doors or ruled outright through subtle channels, but when she speaks, your ministers adjust their posture the next day. And that's not coincidence. She hands you a small scroll. From the archive. Hidden inside a trade manifest. You open it. Inside, a sketch. Your cousin's seal. Crude. Disguised. But the symbol is clear. It's a horse. And a bridge. Code for movement. Crossing lines. You say nothing for a long time. Then, double the patrols at Yellow Ridge. Have the scouts switch banners. Deception. Insurance. She nods once. Then sips. You spend the rest of the afternoon reviewing war maps in your mind. By evening, you return to your private quarters. Dinner tonight is lighter, no visitors, no performance, just a simple meal, steamed buns, marinated tofu, slices of smoked fish. The wine is drier than usual. You drink it slowly. A eunuch enters with a report. No words. Just a gesture. You unfold it. A message from the guard commander. Observed signal fires in the northwestern valley. Not ours. You fold it back. Quiet. Controlled. Prepare a letter to General E, you say. Tell him to hold. Then you stand. The ring on your finger feels heavier again. So you remove it. Place it in your pocket this time, not on the table. Because tonight, you're going to bed with your sword. Just in case. You wake not to whispers, but to silence. The kind that feels too still, like the world is waiting for something to happen. Outside your chamber, the usual shuffle of sandals and clink of morning trays is absent. You sit up slowly. No robe offered. No incense lit. Just the early blue of pre-dawn curling through the lattice windows. Something's shifted. You rise. You don't call for attendance. You dress yourself, simple robe, dark fabric, no brocade. A quiet emperor for a loud day. Then, a knock. You open the door yourself. The Empress is already standing there. Hair pinned. Robes black and gold. Not for mourning, but for command. They've moved, she says. Of course they have. You don't ask who. Because there's only one they now, the riders from the north. The ones who've been circling, watching, sniffing the air like wolves at a weakened door. They crossed into Jojo province at dawn, she continues. Scouts confirmed their banners. You nod. Our cousin's men. She nod. You exhale. How many? Too few for conquest. Too many for denial. Of course. The perfect number for a claim of border patrol assistance. For plausible deniability. For threading the needle between defiance and treason. You walk together down the corridor. Outside, the palace begins to stir, servants scurrying, guards repositioning, horses being readied in the inner stables. The stone beneath your feet is cold, grounding. You prefer it that way. You reach the tower of celestial charts. Not because you want a star reading, but because the highest point in the palace offers the best view. You ascend. Each level brings a fresh gust of wind, rising scents of bamboo, dried moss, old dust. At the top, the observatory dome is open. The sky is cloudless. No comet. No omens. Just a smear of stars fading into the pink of morning. Below, the capital city begins to hum. Traders setting up stalls. Scholars heading to examination halls. Children kicking bundles of straw like they're training for war. You close your eyes for a moment. Then you speak. Send word to General E. Tell him to light the southern towers. All the way to the capital. The Empress raises an eyebrow. A display. A warning. She bows. Consider it lit. Back in the war room, a long table is covered with maps, stones, troop markers, and ink blotches that started as strategy and ended as stress. The eunuchs enter with new dispatches. First one, scouts report your cousin's men are not flying his official seal. Just auxiliary banners. Second, grain shipments from the eastern province have been delayed. The governor cites fog. Third, a group of astrologers have requested urgent audience, claiming a celestial alignment is due within the week. Mars and Saturn. A combination long associated with conflict, bad luck, and awkward dinner conversations. You raise your hand. Tell the astrologers I already read the sky. Yes, Majesty. You eat nothing this morning. Your stomach has already digested 1,000 possibilities. No soup will help. Instead, you walk. Past the Lotus Pavilion, where concubines sleep behind silk screens. Past the Scholars' Terrace, where two ministers are whispering much too early for it to be about poetry. Past the stone lion at the gate, whose expression somehow captures exactly how you feel. You enter the Grand Library. The chief archivist bows so deeply he nearly vanishes into the floor. I require documents, you say. Treaties. Oaths. The original edict naming my cousin heir presumptive, before my birth. The man pales slightly, nods, and disappears into the shelves. You wait. Pacing. When he returns, he carries a bundle tied in old silk. Yellowed scrolls. Red seals faded to pink. You unroll the top one. There it is, the declaration. Your uncle's son, marked as successor in the absence of a direct heir. You were born 4 years later. No official reversal was ever issued. The Empress appears in the doorway, silent. Watching. You say, without turning, he has a legal pretense. Yes, she replies. But no divine mandate. Historians still argue whether the Tang succession was governed more by law, bloodline, or whim, you mutter. Perhaps all three. You place the scroll back into its cloth wrapping. Seal it, you say. Then burn a copy. And send a different version to the Ministry of Records. With a footnote. A small one. She smiles slightly. What should it say? Rescinded by will of heaven. Mandate reaffirmed in flame. Poetic. Deliberate. You leave the library and return to your private quarters. There, you write a personal note. To your cousin. The stars are calm. The court is calm. I hope your horses are, too. A visit to the capital is not necessary. But if you must come, bring gifts. You seal it with black wax. A rare symbol, used only once before, during a drought, to signal that patience had dried up. The eunuch takes the scroll. The empress watches as he vanishes into the corridor. You both stand in the silence that follows. Then she says, "The astrologers are still waiting." You smirk. "Send them in." They shuffle in like frightened birds, robes fluttering, mouths already forming star-shaped sentences. The lead one bows. Mars and Saturn. It is. You cut him off. Bad? Potentially. For me. He hesitates. For someone, Your Majesty. You lean back. Good. They blink. You add, "Tell the people to stay calm. Tell the ministers the alignment favors clarity. Tell the poets to find their metaphors elsewhere." They leave, murmuring. You finally sit. The candle on your desk flickers in the early light. You write one final note to yourself. Let the banners rise. Let the stars pretend to speak. I am already awake. You've always known it would come to this, your reign reduced, in the end, to flickering lights on towers, coded footnotes, and who gets to say what the stars meant. The day moves with a strange lightness now, a pressure before the storm that makes everything feel too sharp, too bright, too carefully arranged. Every corridor smells like decisions. Every bow feels calculated. By mid-morning, the signal towers on the southern road are lit, one by one, visible from your study. A trail of fire across the horizon. The guards call it beautiful. You call it proof. You're in your war robe today, still silk, but darker, heavier, lined with reinforced stitching beneath the embroidery. Not armor. But close. The sleeves hold hidden seals. The belt hides a blade. Symbolism, yes, but also convenience. The ministers arrive before they're summoned. Good. They fill the grand chamber of audience with the smell of oiled scrolls and damp fear. You sit on the jade-inlaid throne and wait until every one of them stops speaking. You only have to raise one finger. That's all it takes now. Minister Zhao steps forward. He's cautious, clever, always chewing his words before offering them. Your Majesty, our scouts confirm your cousin's troops remain outside the northern pass. They claim to be there for festival security. You glance at him. Which festival? He hesitates. The Mid-Autumn Lantern Festival. 3 months early. Perhaps they admire the moon, Your Majesty. A few ministers chuckle nervously. You do not. You say, send a formal invitation. If they're already camped beneath our sky, let them do it within our walls. The court murmurs. That's not fear. That's surprise. You've just invited the problem into the palace. But that's the point, isn't it? Control isn't keeping the threat away. It's knowing exactly where it sleeps. Minister Fan bows. And the Empress's response? You raise one eyebrow. She has already laid the table. You rise. The chamber stills. Historians still argue whether Tang emperors met challenges with open arms to disarm them or merely to choose the battlefield, you say aloud. Let them debate. We'll do both. You exit through the side hall, followed closely by the Empress. She doesn't speak until you've passed 3 courtyards and reached the shaded garden. You want to see his face, she says. You nod. And show him mine. She picks a leaf from the ground. A ginkgo, golden and curled. She rolls it between her fingers. Do you think he'll bite? You smile. I think he'll pose for the portrait first. She chuckles. So civil. So Tang. Later that day, the scholars arrive with their interpretations of recent omens. The comet, now faded. The lunar halo from last week. A toad seen in the emperor's personal tea bowl, alarming, but also, well, maybe just a toad. One scholar begins, Your Majesty, the Book of Changes suggests. You wave him off. The Book of Changes always suggests. Let it finish a sentence. He bows and retreats into silence. Another scholar approaches cautiously, holding a slim volume. It's your poem. The one you wrote during the night of the first scroll, The Peach Tree and the Frost. He reads it aloud. Slowly. When he finishes, the chamber is silent. You ask, what does it mean to you? The scholar bows. The frost will pass. The peach will survive. The wall will remain. You nod. Correct. Another scholar clears his throat. But the bee, Your Majesty. You smirk. Still deciding whether to sting. You dismiss them with a smile and watch them shuffle out, robes brushing the stone like tidewater in retreat. The sun sets as you review the guard's rotations, twice. Not for paranoia, for perfection. You walk alone in the lower garden, past the statues of past emperors. Some look stern. Some look tired. A few are missing noses. One, oddly, has been painted over with red pigment. No one knows who did it. You haven't ordered it cleaned. There's a lesson in that statue. Not all legacies wear gold. A eunuch meets you under the covered walkway. He bows low. Your Majesty. The delegation arrives tomorrow at dawn. You nod. Good. Prepare the pavilion of fallen leaves. His head snaps up, eyes wide. It's not used often. It's an audience hall turned interrogation chamber. Then turned garden storage. Now, it's where truth will bloom. Also, you say, bring Lady Min. He hesitates. Shall I inform the Empress? You smile. She's already arranged the chairs. You spend the evening in the private chamber beneath your study. Few know it exists. Fewer know you use it. The walls are plain. No scrolls. No cushions. Just one table. One map. One candle. And the ring. You place it on the table, next to a small seal carved not in jade, but iron. Unused since your father's reign. It reads, Emergency Command. You leave it there. Just a suggestion. You sleep on a floor mat that night. Not out of humility. Out of preparation. Because in the morning, your cousin arrives. And the question of the mandate won't be answered by stars. It will be answered by eyes. Dawn slides in like a blade, clean, silent, deliberate. You're already awake when the horns sound from the north gate. 3 clear notes, low and steady, echoing across palace stones still slick with dew. The morning light catches the golden trim on your robe just as you rise from the mat, joints aching in that unglamorous way no court painter ever captures. The room is still dim. You leave it that way. No incense. No ceremonial breakfast. No parade of attendants to powder your face and adjust your cuffs. Today, simplicity is the costume. You place the iron seal back in its lacquer box, unopened, and slip the ring onto your finger. It's cool. Heavier today. Outside, the capital stirs with artificial calm. Courtiers hover near balconies, pretending not to peek. Eunuchs carry scrolls they'll never read. Ministers shift from foot to foot, suddenly unsure what day it is. You head straight to the pavilion of fallen leaves. It's quiet. Intentionally so. Inside, a single long table, low to the ground. Cushions, not thrones. An arrangement of symbolic humility. You, the host. Your cousin, the guest. But the room's geometry makes no mistake, your seat is central. Elevated by exactly 2 inches. Every inch counts in court. The Empress stands at the side, robed in silver gray, her hair in a style she hasn't worn since the day of your coronation. You glance at her. She nods once. The doors open. He enters. Your cousin. He looks exactly as he should, broad shoulders, trimmed beard, eyes too clever for someone who claims not to want power. His robes are traveling worn but embroidered with care. Gold thread. Not enough to challenge. Just enough to hint. He bows. Majesty. You return the gesture with the faintest tilt of your chin. Cousin. He sits across from you. Tea is poured. The silence steeped even longer. He speaks first. Apologies for the intrusion. My men were simply concerned for the border. You take a sip. Concern is not a border post, you reply. He smiles. The heavens speak. Mars and Saturn draw near. Your safety, our dynasty's safety, requires attention. You lean forward. And horsemen. A pause. He shrugs slightly. Presence is a form of devotion. Historians still argue, you say softly, whether presence or absence makes a traitor. He watches you. The smile doesn't reach his eyes now. You slide something across the table. The scroll. Your father's edict. The one naming him heir. He doesn't touch it. You kept this, he says. I keep many things. You place your hand on the second scroll. The rescindment. He does look at that one. I see, he murmurs. So it's official. It's always been official. But now it's clear. He nods. The Empress pours tea again. Steam curls between you like a rising wall. He sips. Then, there are still those who believe I should lead. You don't blink. Then they should ride harder. You arrived first. He finally smiles, genuinely this time. We're not so different. No, you say. But only one of us is an emperor. Silence again. Then, gently, he places something on the table. A small wooden token. His father's seal. A fragment of his former title. You raise an eyebrow. I surrender nothing, he says. But I offer this. Not as defeat. As agreement. You understand the gesture. It's a game of posture, not peace. A truce dressed as tribute. But it's what you needed. You nod. Your presence, you say, is appreciated. He rises. Then I shall enjoy the capital for a few days. With your permission. Within the walls, you reply. Under the stars. He bows again and departs. The Empress exhales only once he's gone. You sit back, finally letting your spine sag just slightly. He's not finished, she says. No, you agree. But he blinked. The ministers begin arriving minutes later, one by one, in pairs, like gulls circling a beach after the tide. They've all heard. They all want confirmation, a glance, a gesture. You give none. Instead, you walk out of the pavilion, robe whispering behind you. You cross the stone bridge over the koi pond. The fish scatter. Below, the water reflects you, bent slightly by ripples. You pause. Then, one final errand. To the chamber of ancestral tablets. You kneel. The room smells of sandalwood and ash. The tablets stand in solemn rows, each one bearing the name of those who sat where you sit, held what you hold, carried what you now carry. You light one stick of incense. Bow once. And whisper. The stars speak. The banners wave. But still, I remain. You rise. The court awaits. The capital breathes. And the empire continues. The moon has risen high over the palace now, its silver light spilling over eaves and into quiet corridors. The halls have hushed. The guards speak in murmurs. Even the cicadas seem to know the drama has passed, at least, for tonight. You lie back beneath the silk canopy, the day folded behind you like a robe you no longer need to wear. Outside, lanterns sway gently in the night air, their flames soft and steady. The ring is still on your finger, but it feels less heavy now. Or perhaps your hand has grown used to the weight. Above, stars glimmer faintly. No comet tonight. No storm. Just the quiet wheel of the heavens turning as it always does, slowly, patiently, untouched by the rise and fall of men. You breathe in. And let your eyes close. The empire, for this brief moment, rests with you. Ministers sleep behind scrolls. Soldiers doze beneath walls. Your cousin, too, dreams, perhaps of thrones, perhaps of horses, perhaps of nothing at all. And the palace exhales. You are not afraid. Not now. Because the stars do not command. They witness. And tonight, they see you still here. Still watching. Still, whole.